sermon based off this bunch of characters. Now, some of the younger crowd doesn't even know who that is. They're probably better off that way. Archie Bunker would not be the best picture for the cover of the next men's ministry Bible study. The Bunker family is not what you want to model your family off of. That show back in the 70s was popular, All in the Family. But then before that was a different show. You remember this one? The Cleaver Family. Didn't they make you sick? They were perfect. You know, and as bad as I believe the Bunker family was, and All in the Family, and all of their issues, and all of the things that family did and said and lived, you know, there's a side of me that thinks this family, although I don't think it was the intent of the writers, but this family may have done just as much damage in society because of this. Everybody thought the Cleaver's house was perfect, and that everybody wants a home just like theirs, and here's the damaging part, and that it just happens with no effort. Their home was always immaculate. The meal was always on the table. The boys were always ready for school. The bills were always paid. June's hair was always immaculate. And it all just happened. Let me tell you, that's simply not real life. That's not real life. You know that, and I know that. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen for me. It doesn't happen for you. It doesn't happen for anybody. A good home and a godly marriage doesn't just happen. And by the way, my home's not perfect, and neither is yours. And neither was theirs. I want to talk to you this morning about all in the family. Turn with me in your Bibles to Psalm 127. Psalm 127 is written by Solomon. Solomon, when he wrote this psalm, it's unknown for what occasion to which he wrote this psalm for. His intent in writing this psalm, though, is obvious: to show God's sovereignty in everyday life and in the life of the family. This passage is very similar to other writings of Solomon. Turn your attention to the screen real quickly. Ecclesiastes 2, Solomon wrote this as well. Verses 24 through 26. There is nothing better for man than to eat, drink, and enjoy his work. I have seen that even this is from God's hand. Because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from him? For to the man who is pleading in his sight, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. Ecclesiastes is written by Solomon, King Solomon then, and is full of wisdom and knowledge and discernment. He, Solomon, was the wisest and richest man to have ever lived. Notice that I did not say he was the most godly man to have ever lived, because Solomon had his share of problems and issues that he really struggled with. He, like most of us, didn't have a problem in knowing what God said. Solomon had a problem with doing what God said. That's the same as us today. Let's evaluate Solomon's words in Psalm 127. 3 questions today that I'm going to pose to you as you lead and guide your family. Point number 1 this morning, and all in the family: is the Lord building your house? Read with me in Psalm 127. I want to look at verse 1. Unless the Lord builds a house, Its builders labor over it in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchman stays alert in vain. Solomon no doubt wrote this psalm as he was thinking about the temple he was reconstructing. David had been given the vision for that temple. And if you read through the scripture, you understand David was given that vision, and God wanted David to rebuild the temple, but he never allowed David to complete that. So his son Solomon was commissioned with finishing the rebuilding of the temple. Money was no object in this house of worship. Solomon was completing that vision that David had begun. But the temple was given specific and divine details. The same is true for my life and for yours. And they're making this comparison with our lives. Listen, are you paying attention to the specific and divine details of your life? God gave specific and divine details for this temple and for the house of God. And He also wants that to be true in our lives. Because if you're a believer this morning, the body is simply the house of God. Jesus Christ dwells within you. It's a holy temple. And so God gives us some specific and divine details. Are you paying attention to those divine details? Listen, it's very easy in life this morning just to shove your life into drive and plunge forward. Let me ask you another question. Are you doing all the wrong things in vain? That's what verse 1 is talking about. I know you're busy and you're doing all you can do. You're thinking, Pastor, I can't do anymore. My plate is so full. So you must ask the question of yourself. Are you doing the right things? Some of you walk into church every week, your tongue is just dragging the ground, and you walk in, you're exhausted. The week has worn you out. David made us mindful of that in 1 Chronicles 29:1. He says, Then King David said to all the assembly, My son Solomon, God has chosen him alone, is young and inexperienced. The task is great because the temple will not be for man, but for the Lord God. Listen, the only way you can build this physical house is through the Holy Spirit and Christ living in and through you. If you want a home that will last and survive, you'd better turn to the chief contractor, who is Jesus Christ. He can fix everything that's wrong in your house. But so many people are just running and running and running. They're shoving it into drive every morning, trying to do life on their own, trying to do life in their own strength, trying to do everything themselves, and they're wearing themselves out. You know, if you're a homeowner this morning, you understand this statement. There is something that's always breaking. And you're always having to fix something. Triple that if you have 3 boys. There's something that's always broken. And you're trying to fix it. Wednesday night was a long night for me. I had several people that I met with after church. And I'm driving home. It's about 5 minutes to 10. And I'm almost to my road where I turn off, and Easton, my youngest son, calls me, and he's just yelling. I'm saying, Easton, calm down, son. I can't even understand what you're saying. He said, Dad, Mom is screaming like she's been shot. I said, Easton, what is wrong? He said, Dad, she is standing on top of her bed yelling for me and Jonathan, would you please stop by the store and buy a mousetrap? Into the Piggly Wiggly for mousetraps. I get home, Easton is right. Kim is standing on the bed. So she said, you have got to do something. I saw a mouse. What do you think he's going to do? Kiss you? I don't care, but you've got to get him. And honestly, the next 2 days, within 36 hours, we caught 5 mice. Did I mention that they were in our bedroom under the bed? Did I mention that? So I talked to a buddy of mine. I said, man, we are having a horrible time with mice. What are we going to do? I got to fix this problem. He said, Chris, here's what you got to do. You got to find out where they're coming in. See, my house is not built on a crawl space. I'm on a concrete slab. All my air vents are in the ceiling. There's no way they can come through the floor. But I went outside to where we've got a sink in the garage. And I noticed around that pipe was a large gap. And I said, I have got you. Then I looked at the door that comes into the garage, and I saw where underneath the door, the wood molding had been eaten out, and there was little chunks. I said, I got you again. So I went and got some caulk, caulked both holes, caulked them well. No more mice. I fixed it. But listen, there's some things in this life you cannot fix. You're going to have to turn to Jesus to fix it. I remember a great story by Henry Ford. He and his wife, Henry Ford, the originator of Ford Motor Company, were riding down the road, and he saw a gentleman by the road in his Ford Model T back then. He pulled off, the hood was up, and the man was underneath the hood trying to fix it. He walked up to the man. He said, "You got car trouble, I presume?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Could I take a look at it?" He said, "Sure." Within about 5 minutes, Mr. Ford had fixed it and the car was running. He looked at him and said, "I'm amazed at your knowledge of this car. How were you able to fix it so quickly?" Mr. Ford said, "I ought to be able to fix it because I'm the one who designed it." Listen, some of you are trying to fix yourself. You need to turn yourself over to Jesus Christ. He designed you. Allow him to fix it. I ask you again this morning, is the Lord building your house? Or are you building your house? Point number 2 this morning. Are you pursuing life the wrong way? Look at verse 2. In vain you get up early and stay up late, eating food earned by hard work. Certainly he gives sleep to the one he loves. Solomon here in verse 2 shows us 3 different points about worry, about anxiety, about being anxious. First of all, in that first phrase, he said, in vain you get up early and stay up late. Listen, that doesn't help. How many of you stay up as long as you can, then you go to sleep, you're worrying through the night and just think, Lord, would you send the daylight so I can get up and try to fix it today? Listen, worrying over everything in your life will drive you crazy and make you where you think, if I can just get up earlier and try to do something, it'll make it better. That's what Solomon's talking about. So many are trying to just live this life and accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. Listen, there's an old phrase that says, in the end, those with the most toys win. That's a lie. The one with the most toys doesn't win. He's broke. Some of you are killing yourself, trying to get more and more and more and more. But you know what's driving that many times in our culture? Your children. You're trying to accumulate more and more and more. And some of you have said this so much that you've run this statement in the ground. I want my children to have it so much better than I have it. And you want them to have everything that you didn't have. And you're trying to make their life perfect and help them to live a fairy tale. Listen, you are spoiling them and it's going to hurt them in the long run. And you are killing yourself trying to do it. Listen, parents, it's okay for your child to work. It's okay for your child to do things around the house. Who's going to pick up their underwear when they're grown? But then you're killing yourself every day. I got to get more. I got to get more for them. I got to get more for them. I got to get more for them. Listen, they don't want more of that. They want more of you. And you're killing yourselves. You're in vain and you're staying up. Listen, we have a problem in this culture. I'm telling you, some of you are going to get mad with me. You just have to get mad. Listen, our children feel like they are entitled to everything. You know who has created that? We have. Parents and grandparents. Watch out now. We have created a culture of entitlement. That child thinks he deserves everything. You're working all this in vain. Let me quickly go to the second part of the verse. It says, working hard to have enough food. The ESV says, eating the bread of anxious toil is how he said. Solomon is observing the fact that food shows that we have worked. Yet we worry about all the other stuff that we don't have. We don't worry about our next meal, most of us in America today. We're worried about the next purchase we need to make. Or worried about keeping up with someone else. Or worried about things that we can't do anything about. The next phrase, he says, yes, he gives us sleep to the one he loves. You're killing yourself over and over and over, and you're not resting. Listen, and boy, I'm preaching to the choir because I'm preaching right back at me. You cannot drive in overdrive all the time. You just can't sustain that. Furthermore, you're worrying yourself to death about things that don't matter and things that you can't control. But it says to rest. Rest. It says he gives sleep to the ones he loves. Sleep is given for restoration. Sleep many times gives us to the answers to the problems that we're looking for. You ever said this? Well, let me sleep on that. You don't want to make the decision. You say, let me sleep on that. Isn't that interesting how when we sleep on something, the next day we may have a clearer direction on that decision. John Phillips, one of my favorite preachers and writers, says, sleep is one of the greatest gifts of God. Listen, there are times, listen to me, dads, moms, listen to me. There are times in your life where you just need to tell your family, listen, we're not going anywhere tonight. We're not doing anything. You're not going anywhere. You're staying home. And here's what we're going to do. We are going to rest. So many people are just wearing themselves out. By the way, God knew this. And he created a day for that. It's called the Sabbath. And some people just treat the Sabbath like any other day. The Sabbath was created for rest. Are you pursuing life the wrong way? The third question this morning, are your priorities correct? Look at verses 3 through 5. Sons are indeed a heritage from the Lord. Children, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the sons born in one's youth. Happy is the man who has filled his quiver with them. Such men will never be put to shame when they speak with their enemies at the city gate. I tell you, John Phillips was one of my favorite writers. I read right behind him on this passage, and he says that children are three things. They're our heritage, our helpers, and our happiness. Gets it straight out of those three verses. He said, first of all, they're our heritage. You know, there's a new trend among a younger generation that say, I don't want to have children because it will disrupt my life. Here's what they say. It'll mess up my plans. It'll mess up my house. It'll mess up my plans. You know what? It will. It'll mess up all three. That last one, your house, it'll totally destroy it. But listen, there's no greater joy, God says, in children. Children are a blessing from the Lord. Do you notice how the Greek says that? It says children. It doesn't say teenagers. But no, it's children. Children are a blessing from the Lord. However, that's not most of our society's problem. Our society's problem is that we have become a child-driven society. Now, I feel sorry for Johnny, because Johnny is the one that always gets picked on. Because someone would say, whenever little Johnny wants something, so they pick on Johnny. So I've changed it this morning. I've changed that word to Chad. I just thought it fit. Whatever little Chad wants, Chad gets. You like that? I guess he didn't like it. Let's go back to Johnny. Whatever little Johnny wants, he gets when he wants it. Listen to me now. Johnny gets it when he wants it. Listen, and no matter who it takes for mom or dad to step on for him to get it. Now, some of you are thinking immediately a person in your head that fits the bill. I ask you not to do that. I ask you to take the mirror and look into your own lives. We live in a child-driven society. Listen to me. Your child, my child, is not the center of everybody's world. Let me go a step further. Listen to me now, parents. I am trying my best to help you. I can give you, if I could, I can't because of confidentialities, I could give you example after example after example of people who I've talked to privately in my office after the fact. But listen, your child is not the center of everybody's world. Your child should also not be the center of your world. Hear me now. Your child is not the center of your world. Jesus Christ is the center of your world. Your child comes in third. The way God ordains it is your relationship with Jesus, your relationship with your spouse, and then your relationship with your children. Our society has that all messed up. I'm going to tell you, therein lies most of our problems in this culture today. They can debate whatever they want at all these debates. The problem is people are not following this book. That's the problem. That's the problem. And we are raising a bunch of children who think they're the center of everybody's world. And who has created that? Us. Us. Me and you have created that culture. Listen, I agree with Solomon. They are to be our heritage, but don't let them be the head of your home. They're to be our heritage, but Phillips also says they're to be our helpers. It says an arrow to a warrior is his helper. It's a tool. What's an arrow? A tool to a warrior. Where does the arrow go? When he is shooting the arrow, where does it go? Wherever the warrior is pointing it and letting it go. That's the direction that it's going. Listen, where are you directing your children? Are you teaching them the things of God are the most important thing? Now listen to me. They have a mind of their own. And I know many godly parents who have trained and tried and instructed, and sometimes that child just goes their own way. But God is going to hold me accountable for what I teach and what I instruct and how I discipline my children. Listen, they will not just turn out right. This is not June Cleaver's house. They are not going to just turn out right. It takes blood, sweat, and tears on your knees before the Lord to raise godly children, and they may still do their own thing. Listen, it's more important for them to know how to live than how to make a living. But I read this quote, and I like this one even better, and it's from an unknown source. Live to make a life, not a living. Let me say that again. Live to make a life, not a living. Philip says they're our heritage. They are our helpers. And then it says they are our happiness. That word happiness in the original Hebrew is the word blessed. Listen, do you enjoy your children? That can be hard at times. Sometimes they're hard to love. And sometimes you give love and don't receive it back. And the older they are, the harder that gets. Sometimes I look at our staff and their children are small, and I think back to those days when my kids were that age. And it's just different now. It's good, but it's just different. The older yours get, you'll feel the same way. It's a different love. But they're supposed to be our joy. Enjoy your children. As I talked to Jessica and Trent this morning, it will happen like this. Brooke and Allison just had their new baby Cash this week. I spent some time in the hospital with them. Cash will be grown like that. It will pass so quickly. What are you spending your time doing? Are you spending your time trying to accumulate? Solomon says, stop, it's in vain. Stop what you're doing. Are your priorities correct? Kim's uncle attended Sherwood Baptist Church for many years in Albany, Georgia. Dr. Michael Catt is the pastor. That's the church that has produced all of the movies, the Fireproofs and the Facing the Giants and Courageous. Her uncle went to that church for many years, knew Dr. Catt. Dr. Catt was preaching one Sunday and asked his congregation this: what if you had a compass headed for the North Pole and your compass was faulty? What if it was only 1 degree off of true north? He studied it and looked at it from Albany, Georgia, where he lives. Pastor Catt says there's a chance you would end up, if you were following that compass and it was off just 1 degree, you would not end up at the North Pole. You would end up in the Atlantic Ocean. What you were shooting for, your goal, would be off. And he said this to his congregation: make sure your compass is pointed true north. Then he said this: as that applies to your spiritual life, make sure that your compass is set on Jesus. What direction are you going? What's life like in your home? Is the Lord building your house? Are you pursuing life the wrong way? What are your priorities? Do you have the correct priorities? Where's your compass pointing? Listen, teach your child the Bible with your lips and then back it up with your life, and it will make an impression on their lives. Last statement, I'll repeat again. Live to make a life, not a living. All in the family. How's yours going? Where are your priorities? So my kids are grown. I haven't said a whole lot about the age of your child today, because you're still having and influence. My dad's been gone for a number of years. And throughout this sermon today, I've quoted him numerous times because he's still having an impact on my life. What's going to be said about your spiritual heritage one day? Will you bow with me?